Okay, we're gonna get started. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciate if you can double check that you are muted if you're not presenting to respect the others. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Walter Giglioli, and I volunteer for Animal Aware. I've been involved with the shelter for over 10 years now, and Animal Aware is sponsoring this webinar, how to train a shelter dog. So welcome to this. We have great content today. And if you're having challenges with the behavior of your dog, or if you just want to improve the happiness of your dog, we have great content to cover today. John Cunningham will provide you very specific tips, very specific strategies to improve your relationship with your dog. And I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy his presentation. He'll cover just basic concepts from positive reinforcement, exercise, discipline, and love that are the main needs that dogs have, how to reward, how to socialize, and how to offer great training. A little bit of context of who is John. John has been training dogs for over 2 decades now, and he's been a professional trainer at PetSmart, and he has helped friends, families, and acquaintances just for love of animals. John has also been part of board of directors for an animal shelter in Waco, Texas, for almost a decade. John has written several screenplays where dogs are the main characters. John has a dog that he adopted from Animal Aware. Her name is Squints, and yeah, very excited to welcome you here. Let me talk a little bit about what Animal Aware is. If you're not familiar, Animal Aware is a shelter in rural Guatemala. It's a non-profit organization established here in the United States, and they've been saving animals for 25 years. And that's one of the reasons we are here today, to celebrate the 25 years of Animal Aware. At any given moment, they host 300, 400 animals, mostly dogs and cats. They are the largest no-kill shelter in Central America. I really want to encourage you to learn more about them if you haven't. So in this page, you can see their different online properties when you can learn more about them. And we're going to share this presentation with you afterwards, so you have the links. I think I mentioned 25 years. That's a huge accomplishment. So yeah, just want to take a moment to recognize that. Pretty amazing what they've done. I got to know them 11 years ago, when I spent 1 month volunteering there, and changed my life and encouraged me to help animals in many different ways. So pretty amazing what they do. I want to mention that as part of the 25 years, there's a fundraiser going on to celebrate this anniversary. They do amazing work with so limited resources that it's unbelievable. And so there's a specific fundraiser going on. We're going to share the link afterwards. Aware is trying to fundraise $3,000 to help with on remodeling that they need, and there's still some money that needs to be raised. So we're going to share with you this link afterwards. And yeah, like I mentioned to you in the previous slide, just get to know them. There's pretty amazing stories that they have animals rescued in just impossible, horrible situations, and just not everyone has a happy ending, unfortunately. But there are so many happy endings that it's really worth checking out. So I really want to encourage you to go and check their online properties and see some of these stories by yourselves. Um, if if you want to help, if you want to get involved, we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. There's different ways that you can get involved and help animals. And yeah, before getting started, I just want to mention that John will be happy to answer questions that you have specifically about training your dog. So feel free to. So we're going to have a space for a Q&A at the end of the session. But if there's questions along the way and you want to ask them, feel free to write them on the Teams chat or on the Facebook page, and we will try to cover all of them at the end of the session. I will collect them, and we'll go from there. So yeah, let's get started. John, the floor is all yours, and enjoy.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm very excited to be a part of this today. I have actually been down. I'm a college professor in addition to being a dog trainer, and I took a group of pre-veterinary students from my college down there in 2018 and then again in 2019, and we spent a week down there volunteering, and they do so much wonderful work down there. And as Walter touched on, definitely with limited resources. I was actually giving a presentation a couple nights ago to an animal rescue group at our college, and one of the ladies from the local shelter here in Waco was speaking, and she talked about their shelter having 200 animals at any one point in time and 15 full-time employees. So with Animal Aware, you have roughly double the number of animals and maybe a third of the number of employees. So they do pretty amazing work. And I would be remiss if I didn't show you, and I know this is just on my phone, we didn't actually have this as part of the presentation, but this is my sweet angel Squints. This is what she looked like. If you can see the mange around her eyes, this is what she looked like when I was down in Animal Aware in 2019. So, and I fell in love with that face, believe it or not. She was such a sweetie, and I decided that I wanted to adopt her. And so Michelle, who's a big part of Animal Aware, took her to the vet once a week for 3 months, the entire summer, and helped socialize her. And she ended up flying her up from Guatemala City to Houston, Texas. And I went down and picked her up August 21st of 2019. So a wonderful time. And we are actually hoping to be able to go back to Aware this year. And just to show you, you can see her now. So to give you, that's my version of the before and after for my sweet little angel Squints, who is resting comfortably over on the couch right now. So I'm going to talk about dog training, specifically shelter dogs, but really applies to all dogs. And it's one of the things that I love to do. I love to teach students, but in a lot of ways, I like the four-legged students even more. They're always happy to see you. They love to do homework. So definitely some advantages to the four-legged student. So, and you can see on the first slide here, lack of obedience is a big reason why a lot of dogs end up in shelters. I know obviously lacking spaying and neutering is a big problem too. So I'm going to focus obviously on the obedience issue. So the reality is, you think about human kids, we send human kids to school for 15 years. So, and that's a lot of time out of their life. And whereas with dogs, for a lot of people, I feel like they just think a dog should obey them because they're the dog and they're the owner is the human. So, and because of that, they feel like they should obey them. That's not how it works. Dogs need teachers just like people need teachers. The beautiful things with dogs, as I said before, they really love the learning process. I know kids a lot of times are kicking and screaming when they have to go to school, but dogs are pumped about it. That was one of my favorite parts of working at PetSmart, is just the excitement and the enthusiasm of the dogs every time that I would see them. So as I have on here, and I'm a big believer in this, I really truly don't think there are any bad dogs out there. I think there are plenty of bad owners. Normally when a dog is a problem for whatever it might be, if it's an obedience issue, it's a lack of teaching. Dogs are so capable of learning. They are so smart. So, and it's funny, I think sometimes the owners that just feel like their dog doesn't do what they say because it's just a dumb dog, that's actually usually a really smart dog, and it's basically just choosing not to do what the owner says. So we're going to go through, I'm going to talk to you a lot about how to teach your dog. They definitely learn in some different ways than people do, and I think that's important to understand too, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of that. So it's important to understand how dogs learn. You can see on here, dogs love homework. With training your dog, I would always tell my students, my two-legged students, the dog's owners, because they would come to classes for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on the length of the class. They would come once a week. And I told them the key for really learning is what they do on the 6 days in between class, because when they would come to PetSmart, I would be focusing on training the owner, and then they had the 6 days in between the classes to work with the dog. So for dogs, if you can get 10 to 15 minutes out of them a day, that's good work. So with the average human attention span is about 20 minutes, dogs is much less than that. So that's why I would encourage owners to work with their dogs 10 minutes a day, and you'll make remarkable progress if you do that. If you go away for the weekend and you think, you know, on Monday, I missed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I'm going to try and work with my dog today for 45 minutes. You'll get about 10 minutes out of them, and then it'll be a lost cause. So 10 minutes a day, you will make remarkable progress. And Walter, if you can flip to the next slide. So reinforcement theory is probably the most important thing in how dogs learn. So I'm going to talk about that, talk about the 3-second rule. Those are just crucial to understanding how your dog learns. Basically, a dog reinforcement theory, whatever behavior, whatever reinforcement follows a behavior, determines whether it's a positive behavior, a negative behavior. The key for a dog, so imagine a human child does something wrong and you find out about it an hour later, a day later. You can explain to the human child that they're being reprimanded for what they did the day before. So with a dog, unfortunately, you don't have that length of time. You literally have about 3 seconds to connect either a reward or a reprimand to the dog's behavior. Anytime after that, and I will get owners that swear to me, my dog had an accident on the carpet and I dragged him over to it about 15 minutes after I found it. He knew what he did wrong. It's like, no, he doesn't know what he did wrong. He knows you're mad. He sees the spot on the carpet where he did his business, but he doesn't connect your irritation to the moment that he put it there. So you really truly only have about a 3-second window to connect a reprimand and a reward to a behavior also. So we're going to talk about potty training here in a little bit, but I will get owners that will take their dog outside when it's young, especially, and they're trying to teach it potty training, and it will go to the bathroom and they will bring the dog in the house and give the dog a treat. So unfortunately, in the dog's mind, the dog is getting the treat for coming back inside the house, not for going to the bathroom outside. So on that cold winter night when you don't want to have to go outside with your dog and you let him out and you go back to the door a minute later and he's sitting at the door looking up at you wanting to come in, and you bring him in and you give him a treat, and then he goes and has an accident on the carpet. It's because he never made it out to the grass or to the yard because he knew coming back inside would get him that food reward. So in a situation like that, you literally need to go outside with your dog when you're working on potty training and give him a command, which we're going to talk about this more in a bit, but you need to give him the treat when he's literally outside in the yard doing his business. So, and if you've heard the Aretha Franklin song, Respect, when you're training a dog, ultimately that's what you're trying to do. And I think a lot of people kind of miss that, but we want our dogs to respect us. We don't want our dogs to fear us. Training used to be really negative reinforcement. When I first started teaching at PetSmart, which was probably 25 years ago altogether. So the trainer that was teaching there at the time that I was going to be replacing, when a dog would jump up on a person, she would instruct the owner to bop it in the nose, just give it a flat hand to the nose, all different kinds of negative reinforcement. And that's really how training used to be. And unfortunately, negative reinforcement can work. So I would be lying if I said negative reinforcement doesn't work. The problem is, philosophically, your dog is doing what you say because it fears the repercussions if it doesn't. And that's just not a healthy way to have a good relationship with your dog. So it's really about, I mean, you want to be the boss. That's definitely a part of it. You need to show your dog that you're the boss, but you can do that in a loving way. And there are corrections, which we will talk about. None of them are physical. So physical corrections used to be the thing years and years ago, but now it's just, you know, there are little things that you can do that can make a difference with your dog. So the last thing you can see on the slide here, understanding what works as a reinforcer. So I've talked about positive reinforcement should be every dog owner's focus. So the best positive reinforcer for just about any dog I've ever known is food. So you can verbally praise a dog, you can physically praise a dog, but a food reward, it doesn't get any better than that. So I'm not really going to talk about clicker training, but clicker training is where you have the little clicker that you can use in your hand, and you may have seen people do that before, where they click and the dog, they'll sit and then the owner will click the clicker, or it'll come to them and they'll click the clicker. A clicker is a secondary reinforcer because it needs to be attached to a primary reinforcer. So for that clicker to work, basically, if I give my dog the sit command and it sits, initially I'm going to give it a treat because it understands that as a positive reward. And then I will start to attach, I'll give the dog the treat and click at the same time. So to the point where if I keep doing that, I can eventually remove the food reward and just click the clicker, and the dog has made the connection between getting a food reward and getting the clicker. So the clicker by itself, if you didn't attach any other type of positive reinforcement, probably wouldn't be as effective as it is today. It's a pretty common way of training, but normally, you could verbally praise a dog, good boy, good girl, as you click, but food is far and away the best reinforcer. So, and Walter, you can flip to the next slide. So I don't know who is familiar with Cesar Millan, probably one of the most famous dog trainers in the world. I love every video he's ever made, his television show, the books he's written. I think it's must reading to truly understand your dog. So, because I do think that's a big part of it. He says that every dog needs three things. And the important thing with these three is the order that they're in. If you look at the three on here, exercise. So if I got $1 for every time that I said to an owner, a tired dog is a good dog, I would probably be a millionaire right now. I say that so often. So you think about kids, like human kids on a rainy day. So if they're in the house cooped up all day, at night, they're usually bouncing off the walls, driving everyone else in the house crazy. Dogs are no different. If a dog is cooped up all day, inside the house, if it is in a crate. So, when you come home, it's going to be ready to go. It's going to have a lot of pent up energy. That's why Cesar recommends exercise. The first thing you should do, so before discipline, before love, is you should exercise your dog. And just because your dog may be in the yard all day, it doesn't necessarily mean that he or she's getting a lot of exercise. So a lot of dogs, when they're in the yard, are basically sleeping in the yard or laying in the yard. So this is where I'm a huge believer in walking your dog, and we're going to talk about walking your dog on a leash here shortly. So, but I think it's a great way to bond, for one. I think you and your dog being out walking is a great way for you to kind of build that bond together. So, and it's a great way to get your dog some exercise too. And it's also good for us to have some exercise too. So definitely exercise first and foremost. You definitely reap the benefits. I think especially with a puppy, puppies just have pent up energy like you can't believe. So getting a puppy a lot of exercise is valuable also. Another key thing on here, and you can see in the list, is discipline. Discipline should come before love, which a lot of people, especially if you've ever seen the movie Legally Blonde, where the Reese Witherspoon in the movie has the little Chihuahua and she dresses the Chihuahua up. She has a little handbag that she can carry it around in. That's your typical tiny dog. A lot of tiny dogs don't get much discipline. They just get lots of love and pamper and spoiling. So dogs need to understand who the boss is. So you need to make that clear. And as I talked about before, negative reinforcement does not mean you have to lay a finger on your dog at all. You can use a verbal correction, and I'm going to hesitate to do this because she'll probably think I'm mad at her for some reason, but or wrong. Something like that, just a short little verbal correction like that, indicates that a dog messed up. And if you're consistent with it and everybody else at home is consistent with it also, the dog is going to understand when it hears that noise, or if you use the word wrong. It says on here, no no's. So I'm not a believer in using no to correct your dog. It's a very common thing to do. In fact, I find myself, although I will admit Squints is the best dog I've ever had, as far as I don't know if I've had to correct her more than a couple times in the 4 years that I've had her. She's pretty amazing. But you want to try not to use the word no, especially if you have kids in the house, because you're going to use no to them often. So especially young kids. So if your dog is just laying there and you shout no to one of your children, human children, the dog is going to think it messed up. That's why I said a minute ago I was hesitant to shout those little corrective noises, because that's what Squints hears in the rare times that she does mess up and she's just laying over on the couch. But if she hears that, she's going to think she did something wrong. So that's why I try to encourage owners not to use the word no. So I know a lot of owners whose dogs probably think their name is no, because they hear that more than anything else. So another thing you want to try not to do, and this is easier said than done. I would be a hypocrite if I said I'd never done it, but you want to try not to use your dog's name when you are trying to correct it. So because shouting your dog's name in it, the come command, your dog thinking positive things when it hears its name, I think those are two of the most important things that your dog can know to truly save its life. My older sister, goodness gracious, probably 30 years ago. So her dog ran out the front door after a person riding his bike down the street was hit and killed by a car. And in that situation, so she was trying to call its name to get it to come back. And unfortunately, it was a young dog and it had heard its name a bunch of times in a reprimand fashion, and it makes it less likely to come in that situation. So we're going to talk about the come command here in a little bit. Always praise your dog when it comes to you, because it truly can save your dog's life. Last thing on here is love. So exercise and discipline should come before love. I mentioned respect on the last slide. You want your dog to love you, but you want your dog to respect you as the boss of the house. And I started the presentation with talking about why dogs oftentimes end up at shelters as a lack of obedience. Kind of all stems from that. If your dog is getting nothing but love, it owns you. And when a dog owns you, now if it's a little teeny dog, it may not be that as big of a deal, but when it's a medium size to a big dog, it can be a real problem. And those are the dogs that usually end up at shelters. So make sure exercise, make sure discipline so it knows who the boss is, nothing hands-on as far as discipline is concerned, and then you can follow that up with love. And Walter, you can go to the next slide. So I talked about a little bit about rewards before. Respect, huge. That's what we're working for. Verbal praise is great. So verbal praise, you always have verbal praise with you. If you see your dog squatting and going to the bathroom in the house, one of the things you can do or you can like clap loud, try not to shout its name, try not to shout no, but if you can catch it and then take it outside with you, let it finish its business, you're not going to probably have time to go get a treat before you take it outside. So if you take it out to the yard and it finishes its business, you can praise it. So you always have verbal praise with you. Words don't mean anything until we assign meaning to them. When I was teaching at PetSmart, I had a woman that was moving to France with her dog. So when she was taking the class, so her dog would be obedient and well-disciplined over there, but she was using French commands instead of English commands to teach her dog, because if she's over in France, she figured that she would speak the language of the culture over there. So it was so funny, though, to see the looks on the customers that weren't part of the class, the customers in the store, so that were there and just shopping. They would come observe the class, and they would see her give her dog and even if you don't know French, you recognize it when you hear it, even if you don't necessarily know what the words mean, because it's a very distinct language. But she would say a word in French and her dog would sit, and she would say a word in French and her dog would lay down, and the astonishment on people's faces thinking, she's got a bilingual dog, this is incredible. It's like, She doesn't have, she's just using French to teach her dog. If I wanted my dog, or if you wanted your dog to sit when you said banana, you would just use banana instead of sit. Dogs don't know that sit means that physical position until we make the connection for them. So the words that you use are truly irrelevant. You want to be consistent, but the most important thing, and you can see it here, is tone. So if you look at your dog and say, good boy, so he's going to think something's wrong. He's going to think he did something wrong, even though you said good boy. So tone is crucial. So you can look at your dog and say, if you do that again, I'm going to take you to the shelter John talked about. And it's going to be wagging its tail thinking you're praising it because the tone was the right tone. The tone was a happy tone. So tone is key. Physical praise is great. Physical praise, petting the dog on the head, petting its body, giving it kisses. And I do kiss my dog, so there's nothing wrong with that. So physical praise is great also. Food is great, and it's listed third, but it's far and away I mean, if you had a bowl of verbal praise and a bowl of physical praise and a bowl of food, you know what your dog's going to go for first every single time. So the key with a food reward, and I actually brought couple things here. This is just a regular old dog biscuit. And so if I give it to my dog, it's going to recognize, that's a good thing. So the thing is, though, with a reward when you're working with your dog, smaller is better. So the thing about a big biscuit, I only get 10 minutes of attention roughly from my dog. So if I'm working with them for 10 minutes, I want that attention focused on me. So if I give my dog the sit command and it sits, and I give her this biscuit, what's going to happen? They're going to bite into it. Part's going to fall on the ground. And if your dog has a choice between continuing to look up at you, waiting for its next command, or cleaning the part of the biscuit that fell onto the ground, you're going to lose every time. So ideally, two key characteristics for a good training treat: small, which I don't know, might be so small that you can't even see it, and soft. So this is a soft training treat. Now you look at the size of it. This is the size that it came out of the package. For a soft treat, when a dog bites into a soft treat, it doesn't break. It stays in its mouth. With this size treat, as small as it is, especially if you have a small dog, so I can break off a teeny little piece. I can break off a quarter of it and use that. So, which is beautiful thing about dogs. Dogs do not know the size of the treat, and that it matters how big the size of the treat is. If you took two human children to go get ice cream and one child got 2 scoops and the other got 1, you'd have a mutiny on your hand from the kid who got 1 scoop. So, because they understand that he got more than I did. With a dog, as long as they get a piece of food, it can be as small as it can be, it's still considered a reward by them, and it's still a positive thing. And the nice thing about that too, when you're training your dog, is if you're breaking soft treats up into 4 or 5 pieces, you're also putting less calories into your dog's body, which is a good thing. Because normally when you're giving them training treats, ideally you want them to be, I said soft, but also to be recognized as a treat. So some people in my classes would give their dogs, they bring little pieces of kibble that they would give their dog as their regular meal, which that's hard, which isn't great. And it's also their regular food. Dogs are usually good with it, but if you give them a little extra something special. So while I don't usually teach to give your dog human food, but you go back to the come command. If I wanted my dog to come in any situation, so if I cut up a little chicken breast and got my dog to come and gave it a little piece of chicken breast, there's no greater treat than that. And if you're like me and you have ever given your dog human food before, they know the difference between a little piece of chicken treat for a dog and a little piece of chicken that we would consume as humans. So, all right, Walter, we can move to the next slide. So walking your dog, I talked about it earlier. It's a great thing. It's great for everyone involved. So the dog, this is another key thing to understand about dogs. I talked about the 3-second rule. You need to understand that the dogs have an opposition reflex, which means they pull towards pressure. So if this quote on here, "My dog takes me for a walk," describes you or someone you know, it's because when you put a collar on a dog and you hook a leash to it and the dog is pulling, all of the pressure is in front of it. So all of the pressure is on the front of its neck and the opposition reflex, dogs pull towards pressure, so it's going to make them pull even more. So I actually have a gentle leader here, which is a common thing now in dog training. And I don't know if you can see, but there is a little loop that goes over, I'll move it up a little closer here, a little loop that goes over the dog's muzzle. This is kind of it's what we refer to as a head harness. So it kind of resembles a bridle on a horse. So you think about a horse being a 1,000-pound animal, and yet we can kind of control the direction with a bridle on a horse. This is essentially a bridle on a dog. So when you put this on your dog, when your dog gets to the end of the leash, whereas normally if it just had that circle collar on and it would pull and it would choke, and I've had so many owners over the years say, I don't understand, it's gagging itself. It's pulling so hard. Doesn't he understand if he doesn't pull, he doesn't gag? It's like that opposition reflex. No, he really doesn't. That's just kind of an instinctual thing that dogs do. But with that head harness on, the gentle leader, when your dog gets to the end of the leash, instead of pulling forward, you're basically controlling his muzzle. So it turns your dog's head to look back at you, essentially working just like a bridle on a horse. And if your dog is looking back at you, there's one thing I can guarantee you that it's not doing: pulling. So that's a great option, especially for bigger dogs that seem to take us for a walk. I've had owners, and this is a lose-lose situation, owners whose dogs pull when they're trying to walk them. So their solution to it is, I'm just not going to walk them anymore because it's so frustrating. And if you're just constantly yelling at your dog, tugging on the leash when you're outside trying to do it, it's going to be a negative experience for both of you. And I talked about how it's a great way to bond. That's not a great way to bond. That's a great way to not want to walk your dog anymore. So, Walter, if you can flip to the next slide. So socialization. So if you have, and it can be a dog, it can be another cat at home, socializing a dog that comes from the shelter into the home environment is important. So ideally, and this is not always possible, ideally you would do it over a few-day period if you could do that. So this is where if you did, you could go to the shelter and get the dog's smell on your body and then go home, not with the dog right away, but go home to your animals at home and kind of let them get used to that smell. So as I said, I realize that's not always a possibility. You take, most people getting the dog from the shelter, they probably take it home every day, like the first day that they see it. If you do that, realizing that's probably the most popular choice, try and go to neutral territory. So because dogs are territorial, not all of them necessarily, but territoriality with dogs is certainly a common thing. So by taking the shelter dog home, if your dog that's at home considers that to be his or her turf, which they're probably going to, that's where they live. So it could be a little bit of a problem. So you want to, it's ideally take them to a dog park, and it's always good to have them on a leash. So because if you keep dogs off of a leash, they have total control. So having dogs on the leash gives you some semblance of control. And another big difference between humans and dogs is the ideal way to greet, which is actually kind of a good thing that humans don't greet one another the way it's best for dogs to greet one another, because humans, we look each other in the eye, shake their hand, give them a hug, whatever it might be. So for dogs, that's not how they should meet. That's not the ideal way to meet. It's the way a lot of owners introduce them. They put two dogs on a leash and they let them get nose to nose with one another, which is not the recommended way to do it. If you've ever seen your dog, and this may have embarrassed you before in the past, but you know how your dog likes to go up to other dogs and sniff their rear end? That's a hello. That's a doggy hello. So that's kind of what you want to do. Ideally, you let your dogs meet nose to rear end. It's not the way we would want to do it. It would be unappealing as humans doing it that way, but that's the way that dogs like to do it. So, and that's why some of the things that we've talked about, that 3-second rule, so just how dogs greet one another, it's different than how humans do it. So it's important to understand how dogs learn so you can work with that and not just try and force ways that we learn on them, because they're not going to learn them that way. So Walter, you can switch to the next slide. So crate training, for me, honestly, it's one of the best things I think that's ever come into dog training. So, and we go back, I think about when I was a kid, crate training was non-existent. I don't even know if they had crates. So when you would have a dog and if you left, you'd usually just leave it in the house. And if it was a lab like Labrador, which is what we grew up with when I was a kid, Labradors are notorious chewers. The things that our labs chewed up when we were gone, when I was a kid, the list is amazing. I mean, sometimes I felt just like applauding them because of what they chewed up and how amazing that feat was. The problem is if every time you come home, you're mad at your dog because of what it did, one, you're well past the 3-second mark. So you can point out, take your dog to that pair of shoes, that nice pair of shoes you have that your dog chewed up and say, look what you did. And it's going to look all guilty. It's going to look up at you with those guilty eyes. Tail's going to be tucked between its legs. And that's when we often think, he knows, boy, I taught him a lesson. The reality is he has no earthly idea. He knows you're mad. He sees the shoes. He doesn't connect your reprimand to the moment he grabbed your shoes out of the closet and started chewing up. That's where crate training comes in. It's great for potty training also. Dogs are denning animals. They actually like small enclosed spaces. You got to get them used to it. So you don't want to just get a crate and get a dog and put the dog in the crate and leave for 8 hours. That's not the way to do it. Ideally, you want to get the crate and the dog on a day where you're going to be home. So I would always teach owners initially, you're home, you have the crate, you have the dog, toss a little piece of a treat, just a tiny little piece like I showed you before. Toss a little piece into the back of the crate. Let the dog go in and get it and come out. Don't shut the gate on them yet. So just let him do that 10 or 15 times with tiny pieces of treats. And what's that is going to teach them is, hey, man, I go in this little box and I'm getting food. So I'm going to be more willing to do it. Once you do that for a little while, then you can transition to where you actually get them to go in there and then you shut the door. Stay right in front of the crate where they can see you. And as long as they're not whining or barking, after 5 or 10 seconds, open up the door and get them used to it that way. So that's the way to introduce them to a crate in a positive way, so it's not so traumatic. I don't know that she's in the crate now. I think she's on the couch, but my dog Squints, and every dog I've ever owned, I still have the crates in the house. She doesn't use it anymore. So, but a lot of times she'll just be laying in there. I'm home, I'm sitting on the couch, she's laying in the crate, door's wide open. It's because it's a positive place for her now because of that denning animal instinct. So proper size is important too. If you give a dog a crate that's 3 times bigger than the dog, dogs don't go to the bathroom where they sleep. So I will tell you that. Dogs instinctively don't go to the bathroom where they sleep. The funny thing is, and I've had owners talk about this before, they have their dog sleeping on the bed with them, a young dog that's not quite potty trained yet. And they'll wake up in the middle of the night or the next morning and there's an accident on the side of the bed, but their dog is back laying down next to them. And they would say, John, I didn't think dogs went to the bathroom where they sleep. And I would tell them they didn't. So where they sleep is literally right next to the owner, right in that spot. The other side of the bed, they're not sleeping there. So they don't look at the whole bed and think, I can't go to the bathroom on this bed because it's where I sleep. They're looking literally in the one spot that they physically are laying down in. So the crate needs to be only large enough for the dog to stand up, turn around, and lie down. So if you have let's say you have a small dog that's going to get big, and I don't want to have to buy multiple crates. So you can go buy a big crate that's going to fit it when it's full grown as it's still learning, because usually a dog's full grown at about a year, but they still have learning to do. So they're still typically going to make mistakes. So you can put something for dogs who aren't chewers in particular, put a box inside the crate so it takes up enough space so my dog only has room to lay down, turn around, and sleep. Stand up, turn around, and lie down. Because if it has double that space, it's going to go to one side of the crate and go to the bathroom and then come back to the other side and lie down. So, and because crate training is so wonderful for potty training, that's something I think it's great. And it's just discipline too. I talked about it like when I was a kid and we'd leave the house and our dogs were loose. And every time we would come home, the dog had done something wrong, chewed something up, and the parents are mad at the dog doesn't understand. Everybody's stressed out. So one of the nice things about crate training is when you're using it, you know when the dog is in the crate and maybe you're at work or you're at school, you know the dog's going to be okay. I mean, worst case scenario, if it has an accident in the crate, it's not the end of the world. So you're not going to be stressed out as much. You're going to come home and it's going to be a much better home situation because your dog hasn't chewed something up, hasn't had an accident on the carpet. So it's better for both people involved. And when you come home, whether it's after a couple hours or 4 or 5 hours, immediately get whatever treats you use, take your dog out to the yard because you know it's going to need to go to the bathroom. Take it out to the yard. And I didn't really talk about as far as going potty, teaching it to go outside, but get a command that works for your dog. For my dogs, it has always been go potty. And initially, when I would bring them home as puppies, it might take a while. It might take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to get it to go potty. But as soon as it did, I would immediately give it the treat. And when you're training your dog, and this is regardless of what you're trying to train them on, starting out on a leash is a smart thing to do because it gives you control. So when I would teach owners to get their dogs to come to them, I'd get them on a long leash and I'd say, call them to come. But if it doesn't come the first time you call, keep calling, but reel it in. Be positive, be happy. And when it finally gets to you, even if it fought you every step of the way, praise it and give it a treat. So off of a leash, you want the come command to work, especially if your dog, like I talked about with my sister's dog. I mean, that could save a dog's life. If your dog gets out the front door, if you're like my house where the front yard is not fenced in, if your dog gets out the front door and it's afraid to come to you because it's gotten punished for coming to you, so it's not going to want to come in that situation. It could cost it its life. So always, always, always praise your dog when it comes to you, even if you're mad about what it did. I talked about, let's say your dog does go in and chew up a shoe out of your closet and you call it to come over to you because you're upset with it. So if you get upset with it when it comes over to you after you called it to come, because in your mind, I'm reprimanding her because she went into my closet, grabbed my shoe and tore a hole in it. So I call her to come and she comes to me and I'm going to reprimand her. In her mind, what did she do the last 3 seconds? She obeyed the come command. So every time your dog comes to you, whatever it did, praise it. So even if it did something bad, praise it. It can literally, truly save your dog's life. So Walter, you can flip. All right, some basic commands, and these are some I talked about the come command a little bit. So I'll go back to when you get a shelter dog, if it's a puppy, usually it doesn't have a name that it recognizes. If it's an adult dog, it may have a name that it had it wherever it lived before. Now, sometimes if it's coming from a bad situation, you may want to change its name because if it got in trouble a lot and its name was yelled at it a lot, there is not a positive association there. So that's where trying to reinstall that positive connection to a dog's name, because it might be the come command that you're using to call your dog to come to you if it's running loose outside somewhere, but it also may be their name. So the first thing that I would always encourage owners to do is to get your dog in front of you and you can have it on a leash, and whether it's sitting or not really wasn't that important. So because we weren't working on sit, we were working on the watch me command. So this is where I would hold up a piece of treat and get the dog to look at me. So, and when you hold up a piece of treat, your dog has 2 choices: to look at your eyes or to look at the treat. And if it's like every dog out there, it's going to look at the treat. So what you do is you call its name. So, and say it in a positive voice. Remember, happy tone, happy dog. So Squints, watch me. See if she'll come over here. So Squints, watch me. And the moment her eyes switch from the treat to your eyes, bring it in and give it to her. And they're not going to stay. She's not going to have a staring contest with you. So she's going to move her eyes to look at you for about a fraction of a second. And then she's going to go back looking at the treat. So when those eyes are coming in, you're bringing that treat in and praising her. So that's where I talked about earlier, getting a dog to understand that paying attention to you, that responding to its name is a food source. There's no better connection to make, and it can definitely save your dog's life. So as far as the leave it command, I think that's a really valuable one, especially for young dogs also. Young dogs, especially the first 6 months before they get their adult teeth in, are going to pick up everything. So, and you know, if it's a sock, it may not be the end of the world, but there's plenty of dangerous things that a dog can pick up. So I like owners to teach their dog, leave it. So I would toss a treat on the ground and I would have the dog on a leash, and you know it wants to go get it. So, but just hold on to the leash and say, leave it, and keep saying leave it until the moment the dog is no longer trying to get whatever, you know, in a treat, in this case, trying to get the treat that you dropped on the ground. As soon as it's not trying to go get it, praise it and give it a treat out of your hand. And if you do that through repetition, what's going to happen is your dog is going to hear leave it, even off of a leash now, and is going to think you have food for it. In fact, when you work on that exercise, dogs figure it out pretty quickly that I can leave that alone because I know he's got food for me. And you might be thinking, well, my dog has just outsmarted me. The reality is that's what you want your dog to think. So if there's something on the ground and you have a treat, you want your dog to think, especially if it's something dangerous, you want, when your dog hears leave it, you want your dog to think you have food for it, because that's going to get them to avoid whatever is on the ground. Drop it and give. This is something I am not a fan of tug of war, even though it's a popular thing for owners to play with their dogs in tug of war. We got a rope, we're going back and forth. So a couple problems there. One, you're working kind of against yourself as far as getting your dog, if it's, let's say it picks something up in its mouth that is dangerous for it to have, and you grab a hold of it. If your dog is used to you playing tug of war with it, it's not going to want to give it up. So another thing I see owners do is they'll be playing with a rope, tug of war back and forth, and the owner will win, and then they'll hold the rope out to try and get the dog to get it again so they can play again. And a lot of times the dog will lunge for it. You don't want your dog to learn to lunge for things and make a game out of it. So I'm not a fan of tug of war. I think getting your dog to drop something. So, this is Squint's, this might get her to come over. This is Squint's favorite toy, which is nice because it's about $2 in the store. If she had, here she comes. Oh, you heard it. If she has this in her mouth and I want her to drop it, which normally she takes this to bed with her. She sleeps on my bed, and this comes to bed with her too. So, but when I say, if I wanted her to drop it willingly, when she has the ball in her mouth, if I hold out a little piece of food and say, drop it, she's dropping it in 2 seconds and getting the treat. So that's a really good thing to do to teach your dog. Drop it. Give would be actually taking it out of their mouth. So drop it is the dog has something in its mouth and you say, drop it, and it drops it on the ground. So give is you literally grab it in their mouth and it releases it for you, which drop it might be better if your dog ever brings you, just an FYI, if your dog ever comes in and brings you a, you know, baby bunny or a squirrel, don't reprimand it, even though that you may not be happy with it. It's bringing you a present. Well, you might prefer money or diamonds or something like that. Your dog is bringing you a present. So if you get upset with it for catching that squirrel in the backyard and bringing it in the house, so it's not a winning situation. So it's not going to understand because it's thinking it's doing something good, and yet it's getting in trouble for it. So the treat in that situation, whether you choose drop it or give or both, so it's going to drop whatever is in its mouth quickly once it sees the food reward. And then as far as the come command, I mean, I've talked about the come command multiple times. I don't think you can overstate the importance of the come command. Your dog's name and the come command, as I said earlier, probably the 2 single most important things that you need to have your dog have a positive association and no negative associations with, which means try never to yell your dog's name at it. As I said, I have caught myself doing that. You know, I've been a trainer for 25 years, and I've said it a bunch of times over those years because you don't really stop to think about it. It does something wrong, and it's just the natural thing that comes out of your mouth. But try to limit that. Try to limit the nose, as I said it earlier. When you're correcting them, you want them to think that their names are positive and there's no negativity at all. You want them to only associate coming to you with being rewarded. So to this day, if I have something on me and I call Squints to come to me and she does, she doesn't need the food reward anymore because she's got so many repetitions of it. She just knows coming to me is a good thing. But I'm still going to give her a treat if I have one on me just because of the importance of the come command. So, all right. And Walter, you can move to the next slide. That is me trying to cover as many possible things. And I think I probably talked longer than they wanted me to, but I do teach public speaking classes in college. So I'm used to talking, to get a communication major in front of a camera and talk. So if anyone has any questions, I don't know if you've been submitting them, but Walter, I'm going to let you kind of take over from here if there are questions.
Thank you very much, John. This was great. Really appreciate it. It was very fun, very informative, and I'm sure everyone appreciated it. I think, like John said, now is the time for questions. I do not have any questions that were submitted while you were presenting. So right now, don't be shy. Unmute yourself and ask a question if you want, or submit it in writing and I can read it for you.
And you're also, what if they wanted to email a question that they maybe had later, like if they can't think of anything now, because I'm happy to help. I mean, it makes shelters' jobs easier if dogs are all trained, because as I said, a lot of dogs end up at shelters because of obedience problems. So it's a win-win situation to help any owner that might be having problems with its dog, to help those owners out. So if you have questions after the fact, Walter, is there anything, could they maybe email Aware and Tanya can share them with me?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
You can email Aware. We're going to share the email, or even if you're open to giving your email, we're happy to include that as well.
That's fine too. I'm actually happy to do that.
Oh, you mean Helen has a question, so go ahead, Helen.
Hi. Yeah, John, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're amazing. I've got a question for you about what advice do you have? I mean, the dogs I've had in the past are very food motivated, no problem. But I have one now that I co-own with someone, and she's just not very food motivated. And do you have any advice in a situation like that?
Is she timid at all, or is she shy, fearful?
Not generally, but she's really reluctant to take a food reward.
Have you tried to up the ante with what I talked about earlier with the come command, like just cooking up a chicken breast and cutting that into small pieces, trying human treats?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sometimes, but maybe that's what she needs more consistently.
Does she have issues as far as, I mean, if she's a well-behaved dog and you can get away with just verbally praising her or petting her when she does something well, eventually you kind of want them weaned off of food anyway. So I mentioned, I'll still give Squints a treat if I have one on me. If she comes, and I've had her 4 years, and I'll still give her a treat if she comes to me when I call her. But, sitting, laying down, anything like that, you shouldn't have to over a period of time. Once your dog makes the connection between the food reward and the behavior, then you really don't need to keep giving it the food reward, because in its mind, it's a good thing, because the food and the behavior were connected together for a period of time. So is there a need for giving her food rewards?
No. It's okay. I'll lavish her with affection, and she appreciates that.
I've had dogs that would prefer. I mean, when I said every dog would take the food, there are exceptions to that rule. But yeah, some dogs, and it can be, if a dog it may be a little timid or a little fearful or a little shy, it may like the physical or verbal praise more than the food. But if you tried to up the ante a little bit and got her some human quality food, it is amazing. Every dog I've ever had, the difference between a chicken treat designed for dogs and just a piece of chicken that would be on my plate, not that I feed her from my plate, but a human food chicken, night and day. I mean, they would, there's extra excitement for that, for the human chicken.
Oh yeah, they know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Can I say something? I'm Carleen.
Uh-huh.
Hi.
Hi, Carleen.
Hi. I don't really have specific questions, but I just wanted to thank you. It was very interesting and very entertaining. You're very enthusiastic. I love it.
You're
And I
welcome.
also,
It's
and I wanted to, yeah.
I was just going to say, because each of the slides for the most part is like an hour class that we work on. So trying to cover, that's why I thought if you have questions after the fact, don't hesitate to reach out. But it's hard to try and cover such a wide variety of topics in a small period of time. But thank you for the
But
kind
I
words.
learned
Though.
a few things that I really realized that I do wrong. You know, the name thing and the no thing, and it just made me think. So there might be
I do it too.
Questions.
Don't feel bad because I do it too. I've been training half my life and I catch myself doing it, and I always feel like a hypocrite when I do. But it's natural. The 3-second rule is so big though, because I will have owners swear to me that they know their dog understood 10 minutes later that it's like, no, they don't. They look at you like they do. They show you all the nonverbal things like the guilty look, the tucked tail between the legs, but they just know you're mad. They know you're upset. They don't know why you are. So people end up punishing their dogs, and it just doesn't teach the dog anything except, that's a negative consequence, but it doesn't connect it to the behavior. So it's really just a waste of time, an unfortunate thing for your dog too.
It's funny because I never really trained my dogs. I had a lot of dogs by now, and I never really trained them really. Okay, I am working from home, so I have a lot of time for them, and I know they kind of understand me, but it's still super interesting.
I think the fact, whatever you do, whether I've talked about a handful of commands. There are plenty of other commands that you could teach your dog. I think the training thing is just more than anything else. It's to reinforce.
Time.
But just I think the whole process behind it is to reinforce the who owns who. So if you're the one giving your dog a command and they're the one obeying it, it understands that pecking order, because a lot of times owners that don't do any of that and the dogs are problem children, it's because the owners never taught it anything. I mean, I talked about kids going to school for 15 years. If your kids never went to school and your kids never got disciplined, you'd be wanting them out of the house by the time they're 10. So, I mean, the fact you can't expect more from your dog than you would expect from a human child. So, although I do think dogs are better in many ways than human kids are, but.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
And also thank you to Animal Aware for organizing this.
Yeah.
I've also been a volunteer there in 2012, so I don't know, I never met anybody of you, but it's a great place, and it also changed my life too. It was like the most rewarding month in my life, I think I spent there. So,
yeah, it's very, in fact, I haven't really told them yet. I am hoping that I can take another group of students there this coming May, because our college had banned international trips ever since COVID, because we had a trip planned in 2020 and had to cancel it because of COVID. In the last couple of years, they've said, still have banned international travel, but they have finally opened it back up again. So I'm hoping I'll be able to bring a group of students out there next May.
I definitely want to go back too.
Oh, it's awesome. But they need so much. They need so much help. I mean, they do the best they can, but it's just so different than a typical U.S. shelter. As I said, our shelter here in Waco has 200 animals and 15 employees, and they have double the animals with a third of the employees, and just they do what they can, but it's just tough.
So much work there. It's so much work there, but it was great.
Yes, amen to that.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
I'm happy I tuned into this webinar. It was very interesting.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carleen, for your comments. Appreciate it. I believe Jennifer has a question, so please go ahead, Jennifer.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to know if you could please give me any tip. I have a dog that was hurt really, really bad by another human. So it took a lot for him to heal all his physical injuries. And also took a lot of time for him to be able to trust me, but he doesn't trust other people. As sometimes that fear turns into aggression, so he starts to grow and try to bite people.
Yeah, I mean, it's for, first of all, it's going to be a very slow process because you kind of want to work on his terms. And I'm going to go back to the food again, because I've had dogs that I've worked with at PetSmart that were like where we'd work one-on-one and they were aggressive. And for other people, like you said, your dog is fine with you now, but for other people, this is where food can come into play. Because will he take treats? Like, he likes food, I'm assuming, likes getting treats.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, this is where, and I would always have him on a leash initially, at least when you're working with someone else. So, and I've had owners that would literally toss a treat over to the dog, like not try and go up and give the treat out of their hands because that's too much too soon. But the more you can associate every human being with being a food source, he will start to change. And if he's been, unfortunately, dogs go through a fright period in the first few months of their life where if he was, I don't know what type of injury, if it was from physical abuse from a human. So, but that can be with them for the rest of their life. So even if it happened when they were just a couple months old, so it's just going to take time. But if he starts to recognize that all these people, whether they're men or women or children, if they are a source of food, and part of that too is getting them, the humans, to understand, like you don't want someone to just try and walk over to him and give him a treat, because that's confrontational to a dog. As I said, that nose to nose is not the way that dogs want to meet. So, but if you can have a human toss it, and if you can get to the point where you're making baby steps and he's starting to feel more comfortable with someone where they can hold out a flat hand. You never want to bring a hand over a dog's head, because to a dog, especially a dog that's been abused, oftentimes they're hit over the top of the head. So you want to bring the hand up from below with a flat hand like that and put a treat in it, because normally if you do that, there's nothing really to bite onto because you're giving them a flat hand. It's not like you're trying to give it to them between two fingers. So if you can give it to them out of the flat hand, and you don't want you want the humans to be very calm. And this is where kids, I don't know how he is around kids, but sometimes dogs and kids aren't great matches because kids move faster. They're more hyper, they're more excitable. And for a dog, especially if there's some fear in there or some timidity, that can kind of set them off. So using food and the human food that I talked about. So giving them the opportunity to give your dog some like human chicken, human steak, human hamburger, something like that. But the key is, as I started with, it's just going to take time. So, and just baby steps, and don't force anything. If he's growling, you can correct him. So, and if he's good, like if he's not growling and he seems to be fine when in the presence of another human, praise him. So praising that, using the people to give him food will start to change him. And he may always have some issues, but you want to get to the point where he's comfortable with people and you don't have to worry about him. Like you said, you don't want to have to ever worry about him being aggressive towards someone, but it's definitely going to take some time because you don't know do you know what he went through?
Yes, he was, actually, I don't know how exactly those injuries were made, but his ear was cut almost in half. He had a big injury in his head as well. It was like a really, really big cut as well. And also his chest, it was like he was pulled from something because he had a big, all his chest was red as well. And also he had a lot of cuts on his feet. So he was injured really, really bad. Okay. And it took months for his, at
the hands of a human, or that almost seems like he fell out of a car or something like, so did a human actually do that to him?
Yes, because he was found with a leash around him.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly he escaped, but yes.
Yeah, and that, again, that's when I go back to there are no bad dogs, just bad owners. That's living proof of it. I mean, if he would have been raised the right way, he'd probably be a perfectly happy-go-lucky dog right now. But unfortunately, he had a bad owner, so you're dealing with the consequences of that. The good thing is it sounds like he's good around you, and it's just going to take time to get him to trust others, because even if it was a short period of time where he was abused, it can still have a carryover effect for quite some time. So, but food, in my experience, at least, food is the best thing you can do for him, getting him to trust other people and getting them to be very calm and not approaching him, not approaching the dog, letting the dog approach him when he feels comfortable, making sure you still have him on the leash. So ultimately you still have control, but it's just baby steps, one step at a time. And this is where, if you can share, Walter can share my email with you too, so you can, if you have more questions as we go along, because it's going to take some time to get him to, and he may never be completely well adjusted around other humans. If it was traumatic enough for him, it's possible that he may always have some issues, but you can definitely do things to make him feel better and more trusting of other people. Yeah, trust is a tough thing for dogs that have been abused. That trust factor. I mean, why would you? You think about it. If my owner was beating me on a regular basis, yeah, it can be hard to trust in that situation, and yet it's all the owner's fault. So dogs rarely do things wrong unless they're just neglected or abused or not trained. So, but yeah, don't hesitate to reach out and kind of keep me posted too, and I'll help you how I can along the way.
Thank you for that. Thank
You are welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Is there anybody? I think we have time for another question or two. If somebody wants to ask, please go ahead. If not, we're gonna move on. And we're gonna be wrapping up pretty soon. I just want to take a second before thanking John and everyone for joining, to share some of the resources of how you can connect with Animal Aware, how you can support the shelter. It sounds that there's some previous volunteers here, so this might be a refresher if you haven't. Here's some information. There's some information on adoptions, how you can volunteer, if you would like to sponsor one of the animals that is living in Aware and help with their basic food and medical needs, you can do that. Also, be sure to sign up for the newsletter. There's usually really good information coming, and some pleas for help. Yeah, and of course, donations. As has been mentioned, and as most of you know, resources are very limited. So anything from food, newspaper is a very valued commodity over there, stuff for cleaning, for construction. There's many things. You can always reach out via email or social media to confirm. And of course, money. Money helps a lot as well, so you can donate with that. And as I mentioned before, there's a specific fundraising going on to celebrate the 25 years of the anniversary. So we were going to share that in the follow-up email that we're going to send you with the resources. So with that, I want to thank you for joining, for spending time with us. I hope this was as informative and entertaining as it was for me. Make sure you take advantage of the opportunity of reaching out to John, because he's very knowledgeable and his heart is in the right place. So I'm sure he's very happy to continue helping with the challenges that you have with your dogs. And yeah, thank you. I hope you guys inspired by John and you can improve the relationship with your dog. I hope you got a lot of inspiration from Animal Aware. They sure make the world a better place. So we're gonna send you the presentation along with some of the links that I have mentioned and John's email. And if there's not more questions, I just want to say thank you again and thanking John for presenting today.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate it. We're all out for the same thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay,
You're
Walter.
welcome.
Bye.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you so much.